Greetings, all you denizens of the Enderhive. Today I am finally painting my Necromunda tiles, my Zone Mortalis tiles. So I have many of these, and it's about flipping time I painted them up. This isn't a lot. You should see how much more I've got. What am I on? 5 boxes? I was going to say 6, but that would be excessive, right? So, plenty of these tiles. These tiles, if you've not seen them before, are made by Games Workshop. Super nice tiles. In plastic, not resin, because I don't like the warpage. Although, these have been in my car for a while, and in the code, and I think they're slightly warped, 1 or 2 of them. But that's my own fault. So these things, basically, highly detailed. Yes, you can make your own. Yes, I've seen people use the MDF variant. Obviously, people can use the cardboard one from the N17 box. Hell, you could even use the cardboard and plastic ones from the original 90s Necromunda, which I do have in a box in the attic, and it has seen the light of day once. I've opened it once, back in the 90s, long ago, to play 40k on my own, because I'm a sad man. Now I have friends, apparently. So, painting these up. These are fantastic. I do like these because my Zone Mortalis columns and walls lock into place. The wall sections and the columns there. Really think they've done an amazing job on this. If you've seen any of my previous videos or would like to see any of my previous videos on anything Zone Mortalis related, or even my weird and wonderful Underhive conversions, terrain wise or miniature otherwise, I have made a golden throne, dubbed golden throne. It's basically a toilet. I have made a urinal. I've made a hunter's lodge. I have made a dive bar. A few other different things. But I've made them all modular so they can slot into my tiles. Yeah, you can glue them together and they look fantastic. Not denying that at all, but if you have a foot by foot tile and you're gluing your terrain on there and you go, let's say you go a foot up, which isn't unreasonable, you then have a foot square, which is harder to move around, especially if you're going to different clubs or you're going over to mates' houses on a regular basis. They do look class. I'm not denying that, but me personally, I want my games different every time. And considering I have played, I don't know, about a dozen games of Necromunda possibly, I always like my terrain different every time. Don't like samey stuff. So I'm going to paint this stuff up. How am I going to do it, I hear you ask? How are you going to do it? Well, I have bought a few rattle cans. So I have gone for some TT Combat rattle cans. So TT Combat is a fairly local company to us at St Column, near Newquay, down in the southwest of England. TT Combat, otherwise known as Troll Trader, make loads and loads of great products. But TT Combat make specifically stuff for scenery, MDF buildings, resin stuff, and paint in a large scale. So I've got some 400ml cans, rattle cans. So this is 400ml for a big old £8.50, which I didn't think was too bad. So rather than using an airbrush, I'm going to use this noisy can because less likely to chip. So I'm going to seal these pieces of the terrain with these cans, this lovely matte brown. So do several different colours, but I thought I'd give this matte brown a nice going over. See what it's like, but the idea is it seals this, so when I do airbrush over the top, I will work them up a little bit and chip them. It doesn't matter if they chip a little bit more and the brown shows through. I am totally fine with that. I can seal it at any stage, I suppose, if I think it gets too chippy. But yeah, I'm going to rip through with some rattle cans and show you what kind of colour this matte brown is. Yes, there's several different types of browns out there. There's like redder browns, orangey browns, but I just went for this matte brown just to see what it's like. So I'll bring out the spray booth. So my spray booth, my highly technical spray booth for large pieces of terrain, is basically just a cardboard box, a very large cardboard box. I've cut the top off and two sides. So it should leave you with a bottom and two sides. That's how it works, kids. Very highly technical. So a well ventilated area, a fairly warm environment, not too hot, not too cold. It's the Goldilocks spray booth, that's right. And a really, really noisy rattly can. So just give it a bit of a blast, so it's like. Now what I'm going to do is just a dusting, fairly even, and then when it all settles down, believe it or not, the windows are open and there is a vent. I'm going to do another angle, nice and light again. It's better to do it in two passings at least with a rattle can, nice and gentle and even, because I don't want to take any of the texture away. Yeah, so not too heavy. Duncan would be proud to thin coat with a rattle can. So I have painted 4 of these tiles just to see how far the can will take me, and I've used about half a can. So I've done at least 2 passes on each one. In fact, it's about 2.5 passes because I've done 2 what I would say even passes over the tiles and a little bit extra in the middle, just because for some reason the middle always looks a tad shiny. I don't know what's going on there. Maybe it's because of the room. But yeah, I really rate these cans so far. It's the first time I've ever used the TT Combat paints, and the reason I'm, like I said, using the rattle cans is because it kind of etches in a little bit more, so less likely to chip than an airbrush. Just ease and time. Plus, with an airbrush, you know, you've got a lot of cleaning, things like that. So I thought I'd use a couple rattle cans just for the colours. I don't have to have super amounts of control like an airbrush. And everybody has a rattle can, so why not do an easy tutorial on how I do my Necromunda tiles. So there you go. And the reason I've painted this brown, why have I painted this brown and not more of a orangey brown possibly, or a reddy brown? Not sure that reddy browns are the right rust for me personally. An orangey brown, a bit more like your riser rusts or something like that that I've used before in the past. Mainly because I've picked up a load of terrain in the past, like the Sector Mechanicus stuff, that's had this brown plastic colour to it. Very, very similar to this. And if I have chipped it by mistake or on purpose in the past, that colour has come through. Plus, whenever I chip my models, I normally use the Rhinox Hide colour from Games Workshop from the Citadel paint range, and it is very, very, very similar to this, and that's exactly what I was aiming for. I want to tie everything together. Don't get me wrong, that rusty colour is great. Maybe I should have thought about that about 5, maybe 10 years ago when painting my terrain, but I like to tie all my terrain together. Plus, whenever I look at it, I want to break off a small piece because it looks like a bar of Cadbury's Dairy Milk. There's nothing wrong with that, apart from I'm going to get plastic poisoning or paint poisoning. But yeah, it's supposed to take 30 minutes. I have used a hairdryer on it because I have a hairdryer and no hair, so it just speeds up the process. Like I said, it looks slightly shinier, always in the centre of these for whatever reason. But I have painted 4 of these up in this manner and used about half a can of spray paint, so about 200ml. And I'm using it fairly thickly, I guess. So like I said, 2.5 coats so far. Right, so even though it says 30 minutes, I have sped it up with a hairdryer, but I will wait a little bit longer so there's no tack to it because I've put 2 coats on it, and I want to make sure this next layer really seals between the colour layer. So the next stage is my favourite. So what I like to use is this from Vallejo. It's a chipping medium. Sometimes through an airbrush I do think it's a little bit thick, so I like to thin it out a little bit. And this is what I use, but obviously there are other thinners about. I just think it's quite a nice acrylic thinner. And you want it obviously like normal consistency of any airbrush paint. Basically, you put this stuff down. Once it's dry and you paint over the top, you can then agitate the final layer with a semi-stiff brush, giggity, like a toothbrush or something, preferably not your own, so use your flatmate or your other halves, and don't tell them to put them back in the rack. And yeah, there you get to use it and have a nice funky taste. So no, please don't do that. So yeah, just a little bit of water, a semi-stiff brush, and you can start taking off the top layer and showing what's underneath. So in this case, you have this lovely chocolatey colour showing through your bright, vibrant colours, and underneath you should see some real grimy, rusty sections. So when I finish, I'm hoping to use some oils, some enamel colours over the top, like some real rusty effects, dulling everything down, then I will chip it, and then this stuff will shine on through. So I'm going to pick up the tile slightly. It's probably going to be stuck to the cardboard. No, not too bad. And I'm just going to hit it with the airbrush pretty hard. I'm mainly trying to get into the raised sections, purely because that's where all the wear happens. And in no particular area, no particular pattern. You get the hint, you know how an airbrush works. I'm going to put it over the tile. Covering most of it because I want a lot of my Underhive City to be really beaten up. But I will put some transfers down as well, so like loading bay transfers, like section transfers as well. So I'll rip through all of my tiles, you don't need to see that. But what I would like to see from you, or see in the comments section below, is projects that you're working on at the moment. So it doesn't have to be Necromunda, I'm just really into terrain at the minute. So it'd be lovely to see some of the terrain that you guys are working on. If not, some miniatures, and it doesn't have to be Games Workshop. Just like to get that inspiration going. Best place to share that for us would be on a Facebook page. So that's the House of Chaos community over on Facebook. Just like to see anything really. Doesn't have to be 40k, doesn't have to be Necromunda. Would love to see some terrain though, especially if it was Necromunda. Just saying. So while that's drying, and of course you could always use a hairdryer once again to speed that up, I'm picking my paints for the top. So I have used, I'll turn the light down just a little bit because it's a bit nuclear at the moment. So I have used on some of my other Necromunda terrain these colours. Then I normally dull them down a little bit, and they're a nod to the original kind of like 90s cardboard stuff. So there you go, wonderful. This is why we do it on camera. I'm going to edit that out, right? So this blue is a little bit neon, but once you start weathering it up with some enamel paint, it does calm down a little bit. But I often drop a grey into the mix as well. Kind of grey that I normally have in my surface primer as well, so it kind of ties in on a few of the other projects I've done. And then I've got like a dead flesh kind of colour from Vallejo as well for the centre. That's the kind of colours I'm initially working with. But of course the colours do change, like I said, with a bit of enamel as well. So remember, always go a little bit brighter if you are going to use enamel, because it will dull down a little bit. So I want it realistic, really grubby, yet somehow eye-catching. So I need a nice mix of both. So I don't want the tiles to show up too much, because I don't want to take it away from some of the other terrain pieces, like my dive bars and my snack bars, things like that. So I will be picking these colours while I'm waiting for the chip and medium to dry. By all means, you can always use hairspray, because apparently that works, but I have never used hairspray personally on my terrain for a chipping effect. But apparently it works. Maybe I should do a video on a comparison, hairspray versus chip and medium. I do have some hairspray, in fact I have it handy. Once again, I don't really know why, because I have no hair. But it's something that I was going to check out at some stage. I also don't use makeup. Yeah, I have makeup brushes as well. But that's a story for a different day, because it's the weekend and I'm called Susan. So this is when the magic starts to happen. So I've mixed up my little painty concoction. It's looking pretty good. So what I'm going to do is blast the edges first. So I'm going to do, it doesn't have to be mega neat. Blasting. And yeah, probably should be wearing gloves at this stage. So nice and smooth. Just like so. So it's already fine. It's quicker if you do lines by grids, and therefore you also shouldn't miss anything. So there we go, done. No, I'm kidding. There's a lot to do. There is a lot to do, I'm not going to lie. So just have a bit of fun with it. Maybe put some music on or a podcast. Because if you're anything like me, you have about a dozen of these tiles. And all I'm doing is I'm hitting each square within each tile around the edges. That's how I do it, just like that. So all of the tiles should eventually look like that. You don't have to worry about overspray too much. The only reason I'm not hitting the centres is because I don't want to waste paint. It's just cost at this stage. Later on I will do the centres of each of these squares. Okay, when that's all done, so I'm ripping through several of these at any one given time. Turn the light down a little bit, you don't need to be blinded, do you? So there's my blue outline. So I've done a faded like baby blue, because I can imagine the walls were painted like a richer, darker blue once upon a time, and it fades over time. Now, in my head, I don't know if these boards, these zones in this sector, are like the bridges that you get in Scotland. There's never a moment when it's not being painted. So it gets started at one end, they go all the way to the other end, and time they finish one end, they start painting again. And it gets beaten up, and it gets corroded, and it gets rusty, or it's just been forgotten about, and it's really, really, really badly weathered. That, my friends, is totally up to you. Do you want it extremely bad weathered, or semi-chipped? So what I've done next is grab your favourite silver, so I don't need to bore you with that, and hit the 4 sections just like so. You'll find also there's a couple bits like there and there you might want to get with the airbrush as well. Now this is totally up to you if you want to do it with an airbrush. If you think you've got fairly good precision, or if you want to do it with a good old-fashioned hairy brush. As I like to live life on the edge, and basically I'm going to mess it up on camera just to show you guys and see what I can do. So I'm always going for a laugh. So just a little bit in there, nothing too major, and a little bit on this section as well. Yay! I drew within the lines, like I'm colouring with crayons. Right, rinse and repeat, a billion more tiles to go. So, hitting the centre of these. Rinse and repeat. Next, get your centre colour. So I'm going to be using Dead Flesh, like I said previously. It's like a light khaki, I guess, but there is maybe a slight bit of green in it. So a little bit in the bowl there. It's with this light, it does look a little bit tan, I suppose. But yeah, the beauty of doing it with an airbrush is, yes, speed, but you can be as neat as you like, and it gives a very good effect. So you can just hit those little bits in there first and get yourself a nice pattern. So nice and steady, and then blast the centre. So yeah, just like that. And I find you should be able to rip through half a dozen tiles in one night. So I'm not being mega neat, as you can see, just trying to get those little outer bits first, and I plug the centre like so, and then I'll hit that all again later on, just in the very centre, and then a little bit more in the harder centre again, with a slightly lighter variant in this colour. So as you can see, I'm not being mega neat, but you can take your time and go as gentle as you like with the airbrush. By all means, use a regular brush, just takes a little bit longer, and I find with the airbrush it gets the effect that I want as well. So slightly worn, beaten, and not massively neat. Once that's dry, and like I said, trying to be too perfect, because this thing's going to be beaten up, and it looks like it's just going to be patched up, this area. You know, it's they're not going to spend all their lives with a paintbrush doing it as neat as they can. So what I've done is used a little bit of Dead Flesh, and I actually put a little bit of my surface primer in there as well, just to adhere to it. It's grey, so rather than hitting it with a white, it's going to give a lighter colour, and I'm just going to hit the centre, so just like that. So hardly any noticeable difference, just the centre, like that. Super easy. Like it's a factory. Just keep knocking it out. So now your board should be looking something like that. So like I said, now it's starting to get to the exciting bits. So this is my base board. There's a few other boards I've done different modifications to, and I will show you that in a minute. But the next thing I use personally is a little bit of streaking grime. So I'm going to dirty my whole board up. And this can be as thinned out as you would like. At the moment I'm using about 50-50 because I want to get it dirty, but I don't want to get it completely obliterated with this stuff. I want to leave that for the rust. So this is the kind of level that I'm doing. Nicely thinned out. Doesn't have to be even. If you want to do a little bit patchy in places, why the hell not? Really should be wearing gloves for this. Certainly make sure you're in a well ventilated area. If you can, wear a mask. So this stuff is brilliant. It dries fairly fast anyway, but to speed things along, use a good old fashioned hairdryer. Gently wafting it. Now, to wipe this stuff off a miniature, I normally use a cotton wool bud, or an earbud, whatever you guys want to call it. Although you shouldn't stick it in your ear. But for a big piece of the terrain like this, I use a couple of cotton pads. So soak it in a little bit of white spirit and start wiping the highest, most edges off. So something like this. These are makeup ones, and they're less likely to leave any fluffy bits behind, but giving it a damn good soak, a little bit of white spirit, and start wiping off like so. So as you can see there, I'm leaving behind the edges of each individual square, and I'm just taking off the stuff in the middle. Kind of satisfying. And wipe off as much or as little of this stuff as you want. Now if you notice, I'm not actually touching the squares with the grate, i.e. where the columns go, because I want those to be really, really dirty with some rust in a minute. So here's the board so far, nice and grubby. So for the grates, the metallic sections, I like to use a little bit of rust streaks. Now before it was nearly 50-50 with a little bit of white spirit and the streak and grime, but with this I literally just put a tiny little dibble of white spirit in with the rust, because I want these grates to be really rusty, and that's my personal preference. Obviously you can do it any way you want. So I'm just going to hit up the center of this with my trusty airbrush. Get it really nice and rusty. And that's going to be lovely when it dries. So I'm just going to off camera do the rest of them, and then while it's drying I will show you some of the details I like to add to these boards. Now by all means, if you really wanted your tiles to be extremely rusty rather than grimy, swap out the streak and grime on the main part of the tiles for rust. I wanted a bit more colour from a distance basically, because when you get up close, rust does look great, but from a distance, if your whole table, in my opinion, was covered in rust, all you'd see from a distance is rust. I want to see some detail. So some of the things I've been adding are things like numbers. I'm going to write sectors and caution and things like that. a nice little outline of a body there, nice corpse. And that bit there, that kind of stuff, is because of the chip and medium, which I'll show you how to activate in a second. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to get some masking tape, and this center in the middle here will be hexed off as a caution zone. So that'll be the classic yellow and black. So I'll do that in a second, just in case you guys have never done it before. It's quick and it's easy, especially if you've got an airbrush. And this one little section here, for some reason, I fancy doing red and white stripes, hazard stripes. So I will show you how to do that. So I've roughly masked off this area at the moment. This is going to be for the red and white. The reason I'm doing a slight angle is because I want to keep the blue edge if I can, so the edge of the tile blue. So after spraying it white, I've put some of this nice hobby masking tape on. So this is less likely to tear the paint off, but please make sure that paint underneath the white paint is definitely dry. So I am gonna add a little bit of red to this. So just mixing two colours of red together, purely because what I've got I think could do with being a little bit richer. I don't want it too bright. And let's get cracking. I'm going around the edges first. Okay, so when I pull this off, it shouldn't take hardly any of the paint off at all. It's always nice doing it on camera when it goes horribly wrong. Or even better, when the tape sticks to you. Yeah, I totally did not have to wrestle with the tape off camera. I'm a big boy. But that's not bad. It's really clean at the moment, so I'm going to have to weather it up. And then I'll show you how to activate the chipping. And that's the other masking tape job that I've done. A little bit of freehand there as well. But to activate the chipping medium, basically you need a stiff brush and some water. So I'm going to dunk my stiff brush in the water. Now this looks bad because this is an electric toothbrush. It's a stiff brush. This is not the current toothbrush I am using to clean my teeth. You can just use it and scrub in motion like that. Or you can give it some welly. Now I don't know if you can see that. It's starting to chip, hence chipping medium. And that's exactly what I'm going to do on a lot of my tiles. Aggravate them and get them so they're starting to chip. How lazy am I using an electric toothbrush? Like I said, you could just use a normal stiff bristle brush, easy for me to say. Wipe off the water when it's done. When you're happy with your result, then it's always best to seal it with a nice varnish, your varnish of choice. So me personally, I'll be using a nice satin varnish, not too matte. I certainly won't be using gloss. I rarely use gloss. I need a bit more water, I think. I mean, you don't have to use every square. And you can go as beaten as you like. Little simple hints of where, or go proper nasty. Everything is messed up, scraped and beaten. Totally up to you guys. Okay, so in this video I have painted 6 tiles, and I've used a few different techniques on how to finish off these tiles, as in a few bits of detail. But the overall premise is the same. It's a nice rattle can rust colour to your liking. I've used quite a dark chocolatey looking one, but you can go reddy if you like, and you can beat up your tiles as much as you want. So I've done a few scuffs, so like there and there, but you can make an incredibly rusted hive if you wish, and go completely to town. And there's brilliant rust effects out there. Dirt down rust is very good. It's got a little bit of texture to it as well. Things like typhus corrosion would be very expensive because it's such a tiny pot. But I also do quite like Craig and Rose's. I know this is supposed to be for like a painting a wall or something, but this is a massive tin, and if you ever wanted to make a rust effect, that is very realistic because that actually has a texture to it. I do recommend that. You can put it on semi as a wash, and it doesn't take any detail away, or you can put it on really thick, and when it eventually dries, which you can speed it over hairdryer once again, it still looks really good. Bit of texture, nice different colours. You don't really know what you're going to get, but it does turn out very realistic. So these are my tiles. Well, 6 tiles out of God knows how many packets. I've got a lot more to do, but thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video, and hopefully it inspired you to paint your Necromunda tiles.